I know people hate the poetry questions, but I love these because they're so short, right? It's very clear what we're supposed to do. We need to illustrate the claim. The claim is just like very much just spelled out. And here they tell us that we need the poem to highlight ambivalence. That's a good SAT word to know. But if we didn't know it, they continued to tell us what it meant, right? As the speaker acknowledges its merits, that's like good things about something, while also expressing a sense of displeasure. Obviously, that's bad. And that's what ambivalence means. It means having like conflicted feelings. So you should memorize that word as having kind of like two connotations at once. It's both positive and negative. So let's see, is there a choice that includes positives and negatives? This is about as clear of like a connotation-based question as you can get. So choice A, nor is it valid to discriminate against business documents and school books. All these phenomena are important. Well, that doesn't seem like it's about poetry. So, and it's also saying it's not valid to discriminate because all these things are important. So that just seems positive, right? It's not valid to discriminate. So that's almost like a double negative, right? Not valid to discriminate. So together, that's a positive, right? So it's not about poetry and seems like it's not the right connotation either. B, one must make a distinction, however, when dragged into prominence by half poets, the result is not poetry. Again, maybe this one is about poetry, but it's got the wrong connotation, or at least it doesn't have the complete connotation, right? It says, calling someone a half poet sounds like an insult, right? And dragged seems negative. Prominence means importance, but if you're dragged into prominence, like that seems like a bad thing. So I don't really know what's going on here. I barely understand the line, but I understand connotations, right? I understand positives and negatives. Let's look at C. When poems become so derivative as to become unintelligible, the same thing may be said for all of us, that we do not admire what we cannot understand. So again, this is about poetry, but one connotation, this seems negative, right? Something derivative is like kind of like a bad copy of something else. It's derived from something else. So it's imitating it, but not in a good way. It's an insult. Unintelligible means you can't understand it. And we do not admire, right? So there's a lot of negative words here. Let's look at D. Reading poetry, however, with a perfect contempt for it, one discovers that there is in it, after all, a place for the genuine. So if you have contempt, that means you have hatred for poetry. And then there's a place for the genuine. Well, if you called a person genuine, that would mean that they're like honest, that they're truthful. So maybe poetry can be the same thing. That's a positive. So in a very dumb way, this is about connotations. This is just positives and negatives. And the choice that ends up being right just has a positive and a negative word kind of side by side. And that's really all these come down to. So poetry questions in particular lend themselves very nicely to these connotation strategies because you're not going to understand what it's saying. It's in some weird version of English. But you understand the individual pieces. And so if you can think about those and the connotations of those individual words, odds are good you're going to notice the right thing about the line and be able to match it, especially when we have, like in this case, a very clear task given to us in the question. So do not be afraid of these poetry questions. They are much easier, I think, than they seem.